What makes us write? For me, it started after finishing the books in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R. Martin. I found myself wanting more amazing books to read, but didn't know where to look. So on a stormy day in Washington, D.C., I sat down to create my own. I knew what sort of stories I wanted to read, and figured I should write them because there are likely others in the world who would also like to read them. Though at first I thought I wouldn't finish a novel until the age of 50, I had over 100,000 words completed in about 6 months, and must have been 29 at the time, so goal achieved. From that moment on, I was obsessed. The satisfaction I get from world building and character creation pulled me into this process that now takes up most of my free time. But what really keeps me writing? I think it has to do with understanding characters. As we get older, we realize more and more how different everyone is around us. I mean, can you believe there are people who don't think The Princess Bride is an amazing movie? It's true. Okay, that's an odd example, but the fact remains that each of us is so different from everyone around us, and I want to explore that through my writing. I want to get into characters' heads and find out what makes them tick, or see how they would act in a certain circumstance. As an additional reason that relates to why I started, I want to inspire people in the way George R. Martin's work inspired me, and maybe one day serve as the stepping stone for some other writer to get her or his start. What I write. Many of the panelists at writing conferences and speakers on podcasts and whatnot recommend we find our niche or focus on a genre of writing so as to meet our readers' expectations or give our agents a way to sell us. To this end, you should say I write middle grade, MG, and young adult, YA, coming-of-age fantasy, urban and epic. My novels on Amazon, Backed by Sunrise, Teddy Bears in Monsterland, Falls of Redemption, and the Ali Strom books certainly match this description of my niche. That said, I would argue that we are artists and therefore should not limit ourselves. If you are angry one morning, work on that thriller or epic sword fight in your fantasy story instead of the cute children's book or screenplay or game you have been focusing on. Are you feeling fancy? Put your mind to work on a more literary piece. I have written one literary novel and have outlined a second, and find it to be a rewarding experience that uses a different part of my brain than my typical stories. My short stories are all over the place, and my screenplays tend to be half in the fantasy realm and half in the comedy genre. Luckily, Telltale Games seems to fit right into my genre, as we are doing a Minecraft game, Game of Thrones, and Tales from the Borderlands. Establish a routine. Making sure to write every day is important, as is trying to have a routine. I am a morning writer, or was until we had our second child. At that point, any hope of a routine sank down the drain. Now I write whenever both children are sleeping, or try to take lunch breaks where I write at a picnic table, by a lake, or while eating at Chipotle. If life allowed it, I would wake up at 5 a.m., make my coffee, and write for 2 or 3 hours before waking up my children and taking them to school. One day I hope to be back in this routine. As for the routines I am able to follow, I love listening to music soundtracks while I write and tend to use Pandora or Songza for this. I also, of course, need coffee, and a bit of pumpkin pie or chocolate always helps. Rituals and routines for writing are indeed important, and we should all try to establish writing routines. But part of being a professional is that we make the time and we write. For others out there who feel life is too chaotic to write, you have to force yourself, or it will never get any writing done. The amount of time that you spend making excuses, you could have written a novel or a screenplay. When I am preparing to write a new story, I always turn to the trusty technology of Evernote.